WP-Get Web Dev Tutorials for all user levels. Okay guys, so yesterday I put up a video showing where I'm at with my Elementor container starter site, and there's a few questions that came back about how I do or what the best method is for these toggles. So like a reveal here, for example, is click to toggle where it reveals the content, click to open, click to close, etc. There's lots of different ways of doing this, and I've come to my preferred method, and what I'm going to do today is show you how that is. It does require a little bit of setup, but once it's set up, it's extremely easy to use and replicate throughout your site. So it's not for the absolute beginner, but if you're wanting to learn or you're at a stage where you've got some experience with JavaScript and CSS, you'll be able to follow through this okay. So first thing I want to talk about is the fact that my current thinking is that I relate all the class and JavaScript naming to the block element model methodology. It's something I've come across recently, and it just makes so much sense. It's much easier to manage your code. You don't have to try and figure out on class by class basis how am I going to name this. You follow the same convention for everything. So if we look at the site here where I've created this, so all I've got is a container, and I've got my layout set to a row, and that's all I need in that container for now. And then I've got two containers inside that container. It doesn't matter what they're set to. They can be set to a column, row, whatever. It depends on the layout you want inside that container. In fact, I'll show you something here. If I change that to a row, it's going to be too high. I'll change this one here to a row. Well, I'm not sure why that's overlapping. Maybe it's just in the editor. Let's have a look. Even in here. So I've got that as a row. I have to look at why that's overlapping. It'd be to do with the width of this text here. So it works as a row. And that's all I had to do to change the layout, was change the layout of that container. The rest of it stays the same. So let's take that off so we can look at this. What have I done there? On the right container, I am. On this, boy oh boy, it pays to be on the right container when you're clicking on things, doesn't it? Okay, so there we go. So back to where we started. So I'm going to look at this first block first here. So what we do, and I've named these layers here, how I've named my blocks. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so we can see that. So so using the block element modifier naming, my top block is my standard dash separated name, so called a reveal block. So every top level container for one of these blocks will have the class reveal block on it. I then have a reveal block trigger, which is my button in this case. Down here it's an icon. It doesn't matter what it is. We're going to listen for, it could be an image, could be an icon, could be anything you like. And then down here we've got a block which I haven't named. Why haven't I named that? There it is there. Yes, I have. Reveal block content. What's this block here? That's the next one along. Okay. So we're just looking at this one here. So I've got the naming of here is my reveal block. If I look at my classes, it's just got reveal block on it. Okay. If I look at reveal block trigger, I've actually got a few other classes on there, which I'll talk about as I go through the JavaScript. But the main one is my reveal block trigger. I might just copy those out of there and chuck those into a notepad document so we can see them a little bit better. So that's what I have in there, is a reveal block trigger and a reveal block trigger __ trigger. So the trigger is my element, so it's the button as a trigger, and then I've got a modifier as toggle, which I'll talk about in the JavaScript. So toggle means I want this, as you click on it, it'll show it, and then you click on it again and it hides it. So I've got three states that you can either, so it's the toggle, close, or open. So you can have two different buttons or icons, one for close, one for open, etc. Okay, so that's the reveal block and the reveal block content. We've got, let's grab the classes from that so we can see those. And so I've got reveal block underscore underscore content, so my block, my element, and here's my element, and my modifier is fade. Now the fade is what gives me this fading text. I've got a text mask, which is a gradient behind it to give me the fade. So just by adding these classes, I have a working model for this first toggle here. So that's all I need. So first block is just a reveal block, and then inside that I've got a trigger, and my trigger has a reveal block trigger dash dash toggle. And that's all I need for that to be. That could be, again, an icon, an image, whatever you like. And then I've got my reveal block content, which is here. So it's my reveal block dash dash content, hyphen reveal block dash dash content with the modifier fade. So that's all I've got on that. All right, now if I move to the next one, you'll see that I've got no button or icon where to trigger that. So the way I've done that one is, again, our block is a reveal block, and I've just got a text editor and I've got classes in there. Let's have a look at that. I'll pull those out of there, chuck them into Notepad so you can see them. So I've got my reveal block content fade, just the same as we had before. I've told it that I want my content to actually be the reveal block trigger as well. And I want the reveal block trigger to be a toggle. And I've got a modifier on that, which is the reveal block toggle trigger dash dash hover. So by default, my JavaScript will look for a click event unless I put that modifier on there to give it a hover event. All right, let's actually look at the CSS for that now. So go back to zoomed in on that so I can actually see what I'm doing. All right, so let's have a look at the CSS. So here is my SCSS. I will put this in the comments, and I'll also put in the transpiled CSS. So if you're not familiar with that CSS, this is a bit of a run through on that, but I'll also put the CSS that it actually compiles. And just for those who are not familiar with it, SCSS is it's a way of writing CSS where you can have a lot more control of, so it can be hierarchical in the way you write it. You've got functions, methods, mixins, all sorts of things that you can use to create your CSS. It's a much easier, tidier way to write complex CSS. I love it. But browsers don't understand it. They only understand CSS. So this compiles down into CSS. So taking a look at the CSS, the first one is we're looking for any component that has a class of reveal block trigger. We're going to set the cursor to pointer. So let's go back to our page builder and have a look here. So this button has got reveal block trigger as a class. Right, so because it's got the class, it's going to make it a pointer. So even these over here, when I point my mouse at that bottom right box, normally it's just a text box. Normally wouldn't have a cursor pointer, but because I've got that class telling it to make it the cursor a pointer, anything with that class will be have a pointer now. Okay, now here's our block, so our top level reveal block, and I've got some variables on here. The reason I put variables on here is so that we can override these with attributes if we want to, and that will be the last part of this lesson here. Okay, SCSS, and means append, dash dash, or underscore underscore I should say, content. So what that's going to do is going to create a class with dot reveal dash block underscore underscore content. So I don't have to rewrite all this. This is one of the beauties of SCSS. I'll show you the CSS that this produces. So what I'm saying here is that the reveal block underscore underscore content has a max height of my closed height. So that is when it's not open, so this height here. I've then got an open height, which I'm setting as a default to 200 pixels. And now the reason we do that is because JavaScript will not transition a height. It'll only transition a max height. It'll only transition it if it's set to a set value. It won't transition a percentage. It's got to be I think it's got to be in pixels. It might be able to be in REM or EM or whatever, but it's got to have a specific value for the transition to work. We will actually set that with JavaScript based on what the actual content of that is. So I'll work on that a little bit later. All right, so set our overflow to hidden, so when it's collapsed, we don't want anything coming outside of that container. So if we don't have that overflow hidden, our height will be there, but the content will extend beyond it. So that's why we overflow the hidden, and we're going to transition the max height over the duration for closing. This is our closed state. Okay, we've got the open state down here, which we'll talk about. So then we add a modifier. So this is going to add a reveal block, __ content, -- fade. Okay, so when we looked at our classes, here we go. We've got a reveal block, __ content, -- fade. So that's our class name that's created from this SCSS here, where we've got the and -- content and -- fade. Okay, so when we got the fade on, our default state has a linear gradient, which basically I've got the WebKit prefix in here as well. I'm not sure if it's still needed, but might as well leave it there. And that basically gives us this gradient behind the text. So that's what that CSS does there. All right, so when we've got the open state, so when we've got reveal block, __ content, -- open, we want to then change the way that reveal block content works. So we're going to set the max height to the open height. So by default, it's on the closed height. And we're going to transition that over the open duration. All right, and if we've got the fade, we want to actually move that background out of the way, text background. So instead of just turning it off, it actually transforms it by moving the mask size downwards. Okay, all we have to do to go from a closed state to an open state is add. If I add the class reveal block open, sorry, reveal block -- open. So if I add that to the top reveal block, that then creates a new CSS rule path, which will apply all of these changes underneath it. So that's our modifier, is the open. All right, and that's all there is to the CSS. So that is what tells it to open and close. Max height, which we're going to talk about. I'm going to go through the JavaScript on that. So this max height needs to be calculated because each of these blocks, I think we've got the same text in each of these blocks might have different amount of text, or might have some images in there, or the different height. So we need to calculate what that max height is based on what the actual content is inside that, so that we can transition it. So we go back to our code. Here's our JavaScript. Now, don't worry about the complexity of this look. I always like splitting out my code into stuff that makes more logical sense. Sometimes it looks like you've got more code, but the code actually makes more sense. So what we're looking at is we're saying our block class. So these are the blocks we want to look for, is the reveal - block. Okay. I've got a variable or constant, which is a trigger open class. So anything that has reveal block, trigger, open is going to be something I'm going to monitor for opening the reveal block. Anything that's got the -- close, I want to monitor for closing a block. Anything that's got the toggle, I want to monitor for toggling the block. Okay? And then anything that's got the hover, we want to detect the mouse enter and mouse leave, so that we can toggle the block or open or close, whatever the trigger is up here. We don't really need this click because I'm only doing hover and click, so I'm setting click as the default, but just for clarity, I've added this in here anyway. Our modifier for open, as I said before, it's the reveal block with -- open. So we're going to add that to the reveal block for it to have its open state. And our content class is the reveal block -- or _ element, _ content. So that's again BEM _ and then the name is the element. dash dash, and the name is a modifier on that element or that block. Okay. So heading down to the bottom here, I'm adding a DOM content loader, so we want to make sure everything's loaded before I call the init. And on the init, I've got to get all of my blocks. So I'm going through the my reveal containers, my real block containers, what we should name that as, my document, query selector all, and we want the block class. Now we need the dot for the query selector. Now when you add or remove a class, you don't use the dot, but when you're querying them, you have to use the dot if it's a class, or a hash if it's an ID. So I want to get an array of all of the ones that have got the block class. Okay, and then we're going to iterate through each of those. We're going to get a trigger and an event. So the first one is for our toggle mode. So we're going to set our trigger is a query selector for anything that's got the toggle class. So anything that we put this toggle class on up here is going to get called in that trigger. If we've got one, we're going to process that. I'll go through that shortly. If that doesn't occur, then the trigger, find the ones with the open class. So anything that's got a trigger with open. If it exists, then we're going to run this code. The next one is the same sort of thing, but we were looking for the close element class. So anything that's got the closed on that element, we look for the, if it exists, then we're going to run the close. Okay, and then we just got a couple of utility functions here for show, hide, or toggle, which I'll talk about shortly. So let's go back up here. So let's say we've got a toggle class. So this first one here has my toggle class. Now if we look at the actual page, when I click on that, it toggles it. So open, close. That's just open. If I click it again, it does nothing. Close, click it again, does nothing. So it's just a toggle, open and close. This is toggle, open and close. That's just open, that's just close. Okay, so that's what that's all about. Now, if it is a toggle mode, what we're going to do is we're going to look at what toggle on what. Is it a hover or a click? So we're going to look for the trigger that we just found. So in this case, the button. Again, could be anything. Has it got a class that says trigger, hover, event class? So has it got this hover class? If it has, when we want to throw it, we want to actually treat this as a hover trigger. All right. If not, then it's a click trigger. So if it's a hover trigger, we want to add an event listener for the mouse enter, and we want to show the block. All right. Also added a event listener for the mouse leave, and we want to hide the block. So this is a hover to show, hover to hide, or remove. So mouse over to show, mouse away to hide, or mouse leave to hide. All right, pretty simple, right? If it is a click, so we don't have the trigger event class, or it's going to default to click. Basically, we want to use that as a toggle reveal block. That's actually wrong, I think. That is correct. So on click, we want to toggle, because this is our toggle event. So we want to toggle on or off, or open or closed, based on the click. Okay. All right. Sorry, I got confused there. And then the next one is if it is the open class. So this the trigger open. So we want to just open. We don't want to toggle. It's the open class. Is it on hover or click? And then the difference between this and this is that we only want to, if it's a click, we just want to show it. If it's a mouse enter, we want to show it. So there's no event here to hide it. And then the opposite is true on this one here. So if the event is the trigger close element class, and we get our hover or click again. If it's a click, we want to hide the block. If it's a mouse leave, that should be hide as well. Yeah, so either click to hide or mouse leave to hide. So mouse enter to show on the open, mouse, maybe that should be mouse enter as well, because we want to hover it to close. It should be. So there we go. So on mouse enter, we want to close. So as we hover, if you're on hover, sorry, when we hover over that element, we want it to hide the block. If it's on click, when we click the element, we want it to hide the block. Sorry, I'm just working through this as I go. All right, now the utility classes here are pretty straightforward. So show the element. So we want to get the block element. So that would be the element that we clicked, and find the closest block class. So that is the block reveal. So if we clicked in here, inside that container there, anything we clicked that was a trigger, we want to look up the DOM to find the block reveal element. So that's what it's doing there. So it finds the closest block class, and then it finds the content. Okay, and then on the block element class list, we want to add the open modifier class. So that is going to add this reveal block dash open, which is looking at our SCSS over here. When it's open, we're going to set the transition to the max height and the max height as the variable. Okay, so and then we're going to set the property of that block of open height to the actual content scroll height. So what that's doing is whatever the content height of what's inside this shrunken container here, so whatever content that would be at its maximum height, we want to get that height, and we want to set that as our open height. Okay, so that's the part I was talking about earlier, where if we look at the initially I'm just saying 200 pixels, but because we have to set this to an actual fixed value for the transition to work, I'm having to use JavaScript to go, well, when we click on the trigger or hover the trigger to open this, find out what the actual height of the content is, and then set this property here to the actual height of that content. All right, so that's pretty much what that does, and it only needs to do that when it's actually showing it. So, and I've put it in the show method here because you might change what's inside of that using Ajax. So you might have an Ajax call which changes what's inside there, so that when you click on it, you want it to get the current height of that content before you reveal it. All right, and then hide is pretty straightforward. It's basically get the closest block class and remove the open modifier class. All right, so all we're doing to open or close is adding this reveal block dash open to the top level block. All right, and then toggle is basically the same thing. Find the block class. If the block class has the open modifier, then hide it. If it hasn't got the modifier, then show it. So that's just a toggle based on what state it currently is in. So that's the JavaScript for it. The CSS and the JavaScript work together. Now I did say I was going to quickly show you, I'm just doing F5 because I think I made some changes there. So here's the CSS. My browser's playing up here. Here's the CSS that's generated from the SCSS. So that there, so we've got a reveal block underscore content, underscore content fade, reveal block open, the open modifier, and then the reveal block content, the open modifier, reveal block content fade. So that CSS there is generated from this SCSS here. So it's just this is a better way for me to manage it, particularly when you're thinking of this naming convention, this BEM naming convention. This all just makes sense. If you're trying to write it as CSS, you've got to remember that each one, you've got to put the, that followed by this and that followed by that. And if you've got other modifiers, you've got to write your CSS as every single rule has to have the full path. Whereas SCSS, it's just a inheritance of what's above it, and it just makes more sense for writing your code. So that's that. Now, the other thing is here, see how all these are opening to the same height, And that's because the container by default is set to stretch the contents. So if we go back to here and go to that main container for this block at the top here, all I have to do is tell it to align the items to the start. The default is stretch, even though it doesn't show it as being ticked there. So I tell it to align the items to the start, go back here, refresh, and now I've got click to toggle, and these actually what I want to do is I'll go back and change the color of this background here. So I'll put some color on it, and then I'll put some color in the background of these. Okay, so I'll update that so you can see what's happening. So when I click on this, you see the whole section is expanding because of the content there, but because these are set to align to the top, that sits at the top. So click to open, click to close, toggle. So it's really based on whatever the Elementor defaults are, and right now the default for your container is stretch so that all of the containers inside are the same height. But you can just tick this button here and that will change that behavior. So just going down here, all we've done down here is made that an icon. That's just a straight out icon with exactly the same classes that we put on the button up here, and on this one over here, which is just content, there is no button, there is no icon. We've actually just put the trigger classes on that content so that behaves on hover like this. So hold hover, out of hover, this one's click, and click away. All right, so that's pretty much it. Hopefully that makes sense, and if you like this sort of thing, please subscribe and please hit the like button. Thank you.